Peace. Greetings to you all. Welcome to the Be the Power Hour live stream. It's your host, Brother Naheem, BKA Lord Abba, AKA Mr. Just the Facts. I got my brothers in the building. My brother, Dr. Logic Supreme, is in the building. My other brothers will be on shortly. Tonight, we're going to have a discussion centered around, did the federal government give us a blueprint for reparations? Now, we know that this, I was reading the bill, the CARES Act bill. I was reading through it today. I really wanted to get to the part that dealt with individuals as opposed to the businesses. I didn't even think that was relevant. But, I mean, it's relevant to what it's relevant for. But of course, what we're looking at and what we're looking for is how this stimulus helps individual people that keeps this country afloat in the first place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up with my PowerPoint presentation like I always do. Peace to everybody. I want to send my condolences to everybody who's lost somebody. I want to send my get wells to anybody that's suffering or know someone that's suffering due to this plague, this pandemic that is really shutting us down right now. And we're going to get into this. So I'm going to go into my screen share right now. Give me 1 second. And we are going to get this thing going. All right. So let's see. Where I get my political foothold at. And that's where this man that you see on the screen, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, he says something really interesting. And me and the bros were having a discussion about this earlier. He said, money doesn't make the man. It is free national standards and power that makes a man and a nation. The wealth of all national governments, gold and silver and commerce, belong to the citizens alone. So when I looked at what was in the CARES Act, there were certain things that made me think about the saying of this man, right? The first part of it being civic, right? Money doesn't make the man. It is free national standards and power that makes a man and the nation. Those of us who fight for reparations, one of the terms that we use is being made whole in this country, meaning whole citizens. The second part is when he speaks about the wealth of all national governments, gold and silver and commerce. I guess the commerce part is something that we could focus on. I'm not going to do it now, but because we're not on the gold and silver standard anymore. But he said that belongs to the citizens alone. And I just felt compelled to add that in what we're doing here. So I want to go to this New York Times article, how the government pulls coronavirus relief money out of thin air. Once, in the subheader reads, once fringe ideas and economic theory are now nearly official policy as government borrowing surges and the Federal Reserve signals it could buy unlimited debt. So it reads, and this was published April 15, 2020, just the other day. It says, the United States has responded to the economic havoc wrought by the coronavirus with the biggest relief package in its history, $2 trillion. It essentially replaces a few months of American economic activity with the flood of government money, every penny of it borrowed. And where is all that cash coming from? Mostly out of thin air. It continues. I'm highlighting and underlining these parts where it talks about, because these are the areas that we need to like really bookmark, put a sticky note on those, right? Every penny of it borrowed. And then it asks, but where is all this cash coming from? Mostly out of thin air. This article goes on to break down how that's not necessarily so. So let's continue. It says, but the relief package called the CARES Act will require the government to vastly expand its debt at the same time that the Federal Reserve has signaled its willingness to buy an essentially unlimited amount of government debt. So basically, at the same time, the act was, the numbers were somewhat being crunched. Knowing that it would add to the national debt, the Federal Reserve announced that it would buy unlimited amounts of government debt. No coincidence. It says with those twin moves, the United States has effectively undone decades of conventional wisdom, embedding into policy ideas that were once relegated to the fringes of economics. It's an epic moment in terms of breaking down the orthodoxy of church and state, separation of the fiscal and monetary authority. Let me read that again. It's an epic moment in terms of breaking down the orthodoxy of church and state separation of the fiscal and monetary authority, meaning the way these two elements act, the Federal Reserve and the way government spends are two separate things. They're never supposed to blend into each other, right? Based on what, in the way this article is breaking it down. And this was said by Paul McCulley, a former chief economist of PIMCO, a giant asset management shop. It continues, playing out in the background of this shift is a debate over what is known as modern monetary theory, which says countries that control their own currency can run much larger budget deficits than they typically do, and in part because of the power of central banks to create new money to help finance the shortfall. Basically, they just really have the right to create unlimited money. It continues. What it's doing is just making more transparent a relationship between the Treasury and the Fed that has always existed, says Stephanie Kelton, a professor of economics at Stony Brook University and one of the theory's major advocates. That theory that's being talked about is called the modern money theory, MMT for short. For those not attuned to the wonky worlds of monetary policy and government debt, the parallel policy changes might have been easy to miss. On March 23rd, facing a roughly 30% stock market crash and growing dysfunction in key bond markets, the Fed announced its latest and most significant plan to pump cash into the financial system. That central bank said it would basically buy an unlimited amount of treasury bonds and government-backed mortgage bonds, whatever was necessary to support smooth market functioning. The key word there is unlimited. It continues. When a government bond is involved, the cash moves from one government pocket to another. Once the central bank buys them, it's as if the Treasury never issued them in the first place. This is why the article says making money out of, is titled Making Money Out of Thin Air, said Dr. Kelton, who was an advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. For all intents and purposes, they're retired, meaning those bonds. MMT has been invoked so many times by completely mainstream people and politicians, said L. Randall Wray, a professor of economics at Bard College who has written seminal papers on modern monetary theory. Even Trump used almost word for word what we've been saying all along. And they quote Trump as saying, "You never have to default because you print the money," which is very interesting. This was said by Trump in his 2016 run, right? We default all the time, not just us, but average Americans as well. Anyway, I'm going to end with this last quote from this New York Times article. It says, Mr. McCulley said the speed with which the crisis took hold and the unique circumstances of a nearly nationwide lockdown of consumers meant political leaders had little choice but to vastly expand deficits. And, he said, those who usually question how deficits will be paid for have been, those who usually question how deficits will be paid for have been rendered mute. How do we pay for it? Mr. McCulley said, we print the damn money, basically. So for me, and that's for me, this is giving us a blueprint on how we can get reparations, in my opinion, because the government is basically, they're doing it right now. They're showing us that it can be done. And I want to bring my brother Where L or Dr. Logic on to go in and on some of what I just read, and also add on to this particular discussion. You know, did the government give us the blueprint for reparations?
Peace, peace. Thanks for having this particular discussion tonight. I think it's a good one that we having, and we need to understand what we're talking about here. And particularly, the government showed us that this whole theory and this whole idea of that we don't have the money to do certain things just doesn't exist. What it is proven is that America can produce the capital to fund and finance whatever they deem necessary and valuable. And the actual fact of the matter is they just don't see Black folks and American descendants of slavery as valuable part of the public. And we have to figure out how to change that narrative. So them being able to, first and foremost, the reparations conversation isn't centered around pulling out a few $1 trillion and dispersing it immediately and or over a short period of time. The reparations conversation is centered around a long generational agenda and platform that specifically speaks to the amount of money that needs to be spread out over a generation, because reparations wasn't a debt that was acquired in a single moment, nor can it be fixed in a single moment. So we talk about reparations and how to address this problem with a solution that's multi-generational, right? So, but what the government has shown us with the CARES Act and how they've responded to this medical emergency, so to speak, in a monetary way, it just gives evidence that they can produce the type of capital necessary to support a reparations claim and to take care and handle a reparations agenda. They've proven that with pulling a couple $1 trillion out of thin air, as the article suggests, to address this emergency. So one thing we got to ask ourselves is that, is reparations and the consequences of inheriting all of that damage and dysfunction an emergency, right? And we know it is an emergency because we've looked at the wealth data and how that has fixed our position in this country in present day. And we understand that we are in dire straits right now. We understand that we are living and have been living in an emergency since we've been in this country. But what we need to do is get political juice and political energy behind that narrative and behind that concept. And I will expand and expound on that later in the show when I go into some more things that are kind of fuel that conversation. But what we need to understand is what the government has done with the CARES Act is just, it really has eliminated completely the whole idea that there isn't just there's no money. We don't have the money to do stuff. And I like the way the conversation of that article went, because it really spoke to those people, specifically right wingers, who always are echoing the fact that we can't pay these bills. We're broke. We're broke. We're broke. We're broke. We don't have the money. We don't have the money. We don't have the money. But when it came to addressing this medical emergency that was nationwide, they had the money and they came up with it, and it didn't take them a lot of bureaucracy. It didn't stagnate the legislature. Congress didn't take months and months and months to get this thing on the docket. It didn't take months and months and months to vote this thing through. It didn't take months and months and months to get the president to sign it once it got on his desk. So this is just proof that America can take care of extreme emergencies that have financial and extreme economic ramifications monetarily in a timely manner and in a realistic way. This shows that it can be done. The CARES Act shows that it can be done. Now, the reparations model may need to be structured different because of the need it addresses, but what the CARES Act does is definitely shows the possibilities of a reparations. After that, I'll send it back to you, Evan.
Definitely. I mean, to me, that article was everything, right? Because we see that this can be done. if America wanted to do it, this is something that can be done. And we're going to kind of get into that a little bit as well. I'm going to get into something that Obama said in the Ta-Nehisi Coates interview that I think is vital to this conversation. Of course, you know, I thought that he could do more, but you know, it was something that he said that sparked a little conversation on our back channel. And I think we want to have that conversation here. So, Brother Josh, definitely come in, brother, and give your measure on that article from what you heard so far. And, you know, just share your thoughts in general on the topic.
Yeah, I mean, I had a good understanding of the background of how Federal Reserve is just able, I mean, through the Treasury, we're able to just print money and pretty much solve whatever fire we need to put out in the short term, and that there's not much consequence to us not paying back that money to the Federal Reserve. But I guess I always looked at it as, you know, like they could pay that money just that quick for reparations, and that just where else says it's not necessarily about the financial means to be able to do it. It's about the political will. But for the sake of argument, because, you know, those that are in that space, the politicians, they always, you know, when they were talking about Medicare for all, they were always asking about how much would it cost. So now when we ask about reparations, you know, when we get to the point where they ask how much will it cost, I feel like that it will almost be check. It will be check, if not checkmate. You know, because when we get to that point, then you're of course you're admitting the debt, and you will be saying, well, we could just respond like, of course, we can tell you how to quantify the debt, but just acknowledging it is chief. So from what I wanted to do quickly is I want to show you. Well, first let me make this point. The largest holder of debt in America, a lot of people think, well, you talk about China. Okay, well, they may be like the foreign debt holders. And then when you think about who the largest debt holders are, is intragovernment debt. And there's, you know, like the taxpayer, like the public, especially through the Social Security Fund, when you break it down. That's what most people think. That's what they will look at. And matter of fact, I'm gonna show you a website that breaks down how they look at the debt. But in reality, the number one debt holder to the United States of America is ADOS. We hold the debt. We pay the cost. ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, the quote unquote black folks and Negroes of America. We hold the largest debt of America, and we should have been called that debt, but we don't. What military do we have to back us up? Just like America, they're not calling, the other countries are not going to call America's debt when they're in dire straits, because they know there's hell to pay with America's military. Well, we don't have that power to be able to call America's debt, but hey, it is owed. And let me just share this with you really quickly. Let me just show you this here. This is a website you can go to, thebalance.com, who owns the U.S. national debt. Okay, and they break down the debt into intergovernmental holdings and debt held by the public. Okay, so if you look at the total debt, they say is 23.1 trillion. This is as of second quarter. This is of December 2019. Okay, now I'm going to go down a little bit further, and it says U.S. Treasury security holders by type. And you can see these are foreign holders and all this kind of stuff. Now, let me go back up here. Okay, so this is, I don't know what the exact number is with 74% of 23 trillion. But just understand, if we say that the total debt is if they say that total debt is 23.1 trillion, it really is 40 trillion. Minimum. It should be at least like 35 to 40 trillion, because you better add 12 to 17 trillion in ADOS reparations to that. That's the debt that we hold. So if we take 12 to 17 trillion, that would be more than the total debt held by the public. So we are the largest creditor to the United States of America that they have, but we're not on the books. I think that's a problem. That's a social engineering problem, but that's how we have to look at this thing moving forward. And now just to go really quickly, and I want to break down, if you understand the cost that we paid. This is not some kind of debt that was racked up over 2008, or that they put they got the treasury bonds from 2020 of March. No, this is a 1600, the 1600s, 1700s. We piled up all this debt. We paid this cost. As a matter of fact, we didn't get any of the benefit. We paid all of the cost, and we're eating the cost now. Look at the way we're dying in these cities. We're eating the cost. We're having to eat the failure. We're paying for it. It's the consequence of being at the bottom. So if you're just trying to figure out, well, how did I come up with 12 to 17 trillion? I would encourage you to read this website right here. I don't want to take too much time in reading it, but I want to do something.
Go ahead, brother. Give your measure, brother.
Okay, all right. Let me just read this right here. How much would it cost? While the sum owed in reparations for the entirety of anti-Black discrimination in the United States is undetermined, the amount of the claim just evaluating slavery in isolation without the era of Jim Crow that followed is in the trillions. The market price of the average slave was roughly equal to the price of a house. Using relative earnings, a single slave was worth $400 in 1850. Today would be worth $195,000. As Professor Sandy Darity Jr., a leading economist and premier scholar in the area of American reparations, and Professor Dania Frank have illustrated using the work of Vetter, Galloway, and Klingeman, the gains in wealth to white Southerners from ownership of blacks in 1859 was 3.2 million. In today's dollars, the value of that debt is estimated to be somewhere between $5 to $10 trillion, depending upon the interest rate used for compounding purposes. So just understand, $5 to $10 trillion just off of the value of the debt that's owed from just the slavery. Hold on. I'm not talking about the slavery. I'm not talking about the work. I'm talking about the bodies alone, the assets held that were in our bodies. Okay. So economist Larry Neal of the University of Illinois has calculated an even more specific number just looking at wages. His research indicated between the years of 1620 to 1840, minus the cost of maintenance, medical, food, housing, descendants of slaves in America were owed 1.4 trillion using an interest rate of 5%. That's a total of 8.4 trillion in today's money, just in lost wages, just in lost. So our bodies were worth 5 to 10 trillion. Then the lost wages is 8.4 trillion. That's not even calculating Jim Crow. Okay. That's just talking about slavery, the assets that our bodies were worth. And we're talking about what we're owed in wages. Now, I want to stop there, but I just want to show you what we're not even saying. I would encourage everybody to go to this website here and continue to read further down. We're not even saying that you got to pay this out immediately. Let me show you a plan. Now, we hear people talk universal basic income, paying people $1,000 a month, or now Democrats are saying, well, pay people $2,000 a month until this thing is over. But let me show you what reparations. What I'm saying that they could do for reparations. If you take $3,000 a month times 10 years, so that's 120 months. Okay. And that's $360,000. And you pay that times, let's just say if Black Americans are 40% of the population, and you take out Black immigrants, that's 10% of the population. So you're taking out 4 million people. So let's say 36 million. This is if they gave it to everybody. 36 million. That's 12.9 trillion.
That's the number that most economists have calculated, right?
Yes.
Around that number.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was definitely an excellent breakdown. Did you want to add more to that? before.
Only thing I wanted to say, I'm just gonna do one more calculation. $4,000 a month times 120 months. Oops, 120 months. What's going on here? 120 months times 336 million equals 17.2 trillion. So now you see why I say 12 to 17 trillion.
Definitely. And that makes sense. I mean, that definitely makes sense. Like it's been stated over and over again, this is a debt that's old, and until we get our reparation, like look at what's going on right now. And I'm gonna bring my brother Where L in after this because he wants to pull up something that he's gonna get into as well. But when we look at what's going on right now, when we look at how these checks are being issued, they bumped up the unemployment, right? So if you were receiving 300, anywhere between a range of $300 to $365 a week, you're getting $600 automatically. It shows that it's something that this government can do. Sandy Darity, whom Brother Josh cited in that article, he has a book that's out now. I believe it's on Audible now. And I'm going to get that book. I'm going to read it. I'm going to dissect it, because one of the things that the book is setting out to do is show how this thing can be done. And if you give the people what they're owed, it's not like they're going to hold on to that money. They're going to put it back into the economy. It is going to help. It is going to help America. And to not do it shows that you just really don't care about us. And, you know, I've been fighting and biting my tongue and saying things about this plague, but I have to say in this moment that this plague has shown us that America just still don't care about us. I don't care who you're electing into office. And until we run, and my brother Where L is going to get it into that as well, my brother Dr. Logic, until we start to put ourselves in the positions of power in this land and stop being afraid of it. I think we're afraid to push for something outside of sounding like the dude from In Living Color, Oswald Bates, and talking a bunch of mumbo jumbo that means absolutely nothing in the real world. And until we shake that fear, we're going to always be at the bottom. I think it's every citizen's job to know a little bit about civics and government, but this is also what elected officials are for in this democratic republic, in this representative republic that we have, this representative democracy. It is their job to study this so that they can use the power of that information, use the power of their office so that they can get the things done necessary for the citizens, particularly on a local level, the constituency. And we have to start moving that way. And, you know, I don't want to bleed over into my brother Where because he's going to go in on that as well. So, but I just wanted to interject that so that people could know that we have to become politically active, man. We have to shake the fear. Stop being scared. I think these people are scared of these Europeans. That's why they keep saying, if you try to build, we need to build our own cities. You seen what happened to Black Wall Street? They bombed Black. Well, yo, this 2020, bro. You think they gonna come bomb us? We different now. We G'd up. We strapped up. We gangstered up. We soldiered up. This ADOS life made us something different. This ain't the time of our great-great-grandparents they had to look on the ground when they walked past. Nah, this ain't that. Turn the other cheek and I'll break you. What RZA say, yo, let me bring my brother Where L before I start preaching. Hey, yo, go in, bro.
No doubt. Before I go in on what I had intended to address, I just want to for a moment speak about Ronald Drumham's comment saying, in response to Josh's breakdown, saying it's more than that. It is 21 trillion as a base floor. You have to keep in mind that Josh was putting a temporal payout on that. He was using the base of 10 years, right? Right, 120 months or so, or so. So you have to understand that too. That changes a lot of different things. So when we're talking about this, what I would like people to understand, if we're going to talk about a 21 trillion debt, which is totally legitimate, we have to understand political reason and logic. We have to understand what's reasonably suggestible and how to go about suggesting that outcome and how to go about generating that type of initiative to produce that outcome. So if we're going to talk about $21 trillion, right, we can't say, give me $21 trillion right now. We need to understand what we're talking about being repaired for. We're talking about reparative justice for chattel slavery and everything that was a subsequent reality that was an outgrowth from chattel slavery, Jim Crow, 100 years of Jim Crow, 85 years of lynching. We're talking about convict leasing. We're talking about all of that, redlining, everything that came with being made the floor for America. So it didn't have, that debt wasn't accrued overnight. And we shouldn't suggest or think it's reasonable for it to be repaired or paid overnight or in some quick way. I think it's a generational debt, and it should be paid out generationally. You understand what I'm saying? So I think 20 to 30 years of reparation initiatives, payouts, and things of the like should be what we're talking about when we speak about reparations.
Let me add real quick. I just want to insert real quick. The money is not the only thing that we're fighting for in reparations. For those that don't know, right? You know, because some people, they think is begging. I'm not even getting into that, right? We did that on the last show, but there's so many things that come with repairing a broken people. And the money that we were boxed out of is one of those things. Go ahead and continue, brother.
Absolutely. So when we talking about the money that we were boxed out of, the economics that we was, that's one part of the argument. That's one part of the repair. You have to repair that economic situation in order for all of the other things to be a reasonable reality to pursue for our group, right? You can't suppress economically a people the way we were suppressed and think that you don't have to cut no check. That just don't make no sense. So, but we're gonna talk about race-specific policies. And when we start talking about reparations for a specific group, the type of pushback we get, and we're going to start exposing how it don't make any sense. So we know that Barack Obama has been like kind of a champion for Black people in an imaginary sense, in a romanticized way. But let's talk about Obama for a second, right? Ta-Nehisi Coates did a very good interview. I think he could have went a little further, but he did a decent interview with Obama. And this is what Ta-Nehisi Coates asked Obama in regards to this thing. And let's frame it in the sense that we're looking at this as a specific group, Black politics for Black people, right? Coates says, I've got all the goods. Talk to David Axelrod. Talk to David Polouf. Obama, I'm ready, right? He's framing, I'm ready to just fill in the gaps. Coates, I thought we'd talk about policy today. Great. I like Coates bringing it in this way. I thought we'd talk about policy today, right? A lot of Black folks don't want to talk about policy because they don't understand it. But Coates wants to talk about policy. He says, I wanted to start by getting a sense of your mindset coming into the job. And as I've understood you, and you can reject this, your perspective is that a mixture of universalist policies in combination with an increased level of personal responsibility and communal responsibility among African Americans when we talk about these gaps. He's talking about the racial wealth gap, y'all, that we see between Black and white America. That really is the way forward. It is a correct summation, right? And this is what Obama says, right? Obama says, I think this is very important. Obama says, I think it's a three-legged stool and you left one out, which is vigorous enforcement of anti-discrimination laws so that that way we thought about it when we came in is that. So understand this is reading as a conversation, right? Not as a literary piece. So understand what the conversation is about. So Obama goes on to say, and obviously we came in during crisis. He's speaking about the 2008 real estate crisis, the collapse of the economy, the real estate, the stock market, the recession, all of that, right? He said we came in during crisis. So how we might have structured our policy sequencing if when we came in, the economy was okay and we weren't potentially going into a great recession and folks weren't all losing their homes might have been different. But as a general matter, my view would be that if you want to get at African American poverty, the income gap, wealth gap, achievement gap, and the most important thing is to make sure the society as a whole does right by people who are poor, are working class, are aspiring to a better life for their kids, higher minimum wages, full employment programs, early childhood education. Those kinds of programs are by design universal, but by definition, because they are helping folks who are in the worst economic situations, are most likely to disproportionately impact and benefit African Americans. They also have the benefit of being sellable to a majority of the body politic, right? So we're not even going to go into step 2 at this particular time.
So wait, I just wanted to be clear. Basically, what he's saying is that the only way to tackle reparations is through class-based initiatives.
Yes.
If I'm reading and understanding what he's saying correctly.
Yeah, because he goes on to talk about that in step number 2. And this is where I think policies do need to be somewhat race specific, is making sure that institutions are not discriminatory, right? So I understand where he's trying to go, but we have to understand Obama didn't get where he arrived at it and not knowing how to like dance around questions and like satisfy answers without really putting any substance in it, right? So what he's saying is he understands the need for race-based policies, but he's not really willing to commit to a race-based policy. He wants to suggest a universal inclusionary approach to a race-specific issue that was created by race-specific policies, right? So that is a problem in and of itself.
Facts.
Obama basically understands that it's a two-part, it's more than a two-part problem, but I want to focus on 2 parts today, right? One part is he talked about that the problematic issue of getting political traction. He said, when I came into office, I was dealing with the economy. I was dealing with the housing market collapse. I was dealing with this. I was dealing with that. Okay, Obama, personally, I will give you that. I'll give you your first 4 years saying you came in and you inherited some crisis. But in your second term, there's no excuse why you couldn't have championed a Black agenda, why you couldn't have championed a reparations claim, why you couldn't have championed a race-specific policy for the most injured and vulnerable people and group in this country. He acknowledges the need for a race-specific policy agenda, but he's not willing to champion one. That's a problem for me, right? Now, the other problem is Black folks' lack of political energy, right? We have to have that type of political energy that is permeating and radiating from a local and state level that is transferring and metastasizing all the way to Washington, D.C. We can't continue to think that we're going to be relative politically if we don't turn out to elections, if we don't understand the political makeup of our localities, starting from the local to state levels. If we're just understand this, we don't have a single ADOS, Black, Asiatic, whatever terminology you want to use. We don't even have one of those as a governor of any of the states of the United States right now. That is a serious, serious problem politically, right? We live in a federalist society that shares power from the central government with all of the regional governments that we call states. We do not have any type of real efficacy politically in state government. We don't even have one representative in any of the 50 states that looks like us. Understand that magnitude that I'm talking about. Not even in a state like Mississippi, where has the highest concentration per capita of Black folks. They don't have a Black governor. You understand that? We don't have one Black governor. So once we understand what we need to do politically, we can't think that we can just go to the polls and vote us a president in and think we're going to get a agenda as wide spreading and expansive and impactful as reparations done, and not have exercise political power in the sense that where we can even elect a one governor, right? We don't even have one governor. We got to be real about our political situation and our political footing in this country. We don't even have one Asiatic, Black, American descendant of slavery, foundational Black American. I don't care what term you want to use. We don't have one of those as a governor right now. And until we can start to exercise political dominance, and if we can't exercise political dominance, we at least need to be able to offer a political consequence to dismissing us and writing us off and not understanding that we are the reason why certain parties, particularly the Democrats in this country, are even able to win an election.
Facts.
So we can go into that. That can roll over and snowball into a lot of different things. But I just wanted to say that at this moment.
Definitely. And I mean, that was a beautiful breakdown as well. Brother Josh, did you want to add to that discussion or add to that point about Obama's response? Because I mean, you know, there's a piece in this thing that really I understood, like, you know, and I think my brother you know, he's our political analyst on this platform, right? And you know, he took the emotion out of it about Obama and what he could have done, etc. Because at some point you have to factor in political expediency, etc., etc. What is politically expedient? We've seen Marianne Williamson say that on the stage. Although she brought up reparations, she gave a price tag that was so low that she had to preface it with, well, you know, I'm being politically expedient here by saying it's this amount, but really it's this amount. So what are your thoughts on that? I don't know if you're going to get into that part of the Coates' interview, but when you get finished, if you don't, I want to read that part real quick.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to go back to the brother that was saying that 21 trillion. You know, we can throw out all kind of numbers. I think the reason why Dr. Sandy Darity centered on 12 to 17 trillion was because, let me bring this up here, was because of this here. This is the wealth distribution by race in America. We bring this chart up every time because I want to show you that, of course, we know this is as of 2016. Now, a lot of people say, well, the numbers went up since then. But yeah, they came right back down. The market lost all the value that it gained under Trump from the last numbers from 2019, and it's probably lower than when Trump got in office now. I can't. Don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere around that. So I want to say that we have 3 trillion and we're 13% of the population. If we're 14% of the population, we're supposed to have 13, 14% of the wealth minimum. Building the country, you're supposed to have way more than that. So that means that white America should not have 100 trillion out of 100 trillion. We should be eating into that pie or eating into these people's pie. Our slice of the pie should be a nice chunk, being the ones that built America, that paid all the costs, that undergirded the bottom, that's been the human body bags and the human meat shields that on the front lines protecting, serving America as we die disproportionately with COVID-19. We're supposed to have a way bigger piece of the pie. So when we say 13 to 14 trillion, what we're saying is, 12 to 17 trillion, what we're saying is we need something that is more representative of our population and a little bit more. That's how you justify it, because that amount is a way to quote unquote close the racial wealth gap. So I just wanted to say that to that point. And as far as Obama, well, we were building on this earlier. Obama actually was, most of us didn't really have the nuanced political understanding to know how to view Obama from the beginning. I didn't. I know when Obama was first running in like the 2008 elections, I was like what, 20 in my early 20s, right? So I just saw him as a brother. I got out and canvassed for him. I got people. I was involved with the campaign. I'm gonna address this, but let me say this real quick. So we didn't understand to not see Obama as a we just looked at Obama as a brother. Oh, the brother run for president. But in reality, you have to look at who he was and his background. So I think if we did that, maybe our expectations would have been a little bit different, and we wouldn't have given him the pass, and too many people wouldn't have thought, well, he can just hook us up on the next term. We can't do anything right now. He's gonna do something. No, he's not gonna do nothing. If you knew who he was for real.
Hey, remember Al Sharpton was like, no criticizing Obama. Like, yo, they had like a MSNBC insider policy. We not criticizing Obama.
Yeah, and he deserved criticism. If we understood who he was coming in there, we would have known to hold him accountable in a very strong and stern, strict way. We wouldn't have been playing no games, because we would have looked at him as really like a foreigner or somebody that, like, you don't get to be looked at as a quote unquote a black man coming from slavery when your background is not that. Your background is your background is your daddy was Kenyan, nothing wrong with that. Your mom was white, nothing wrong with that. You grew up with your white grandma, nothing wrong with that. However, when you try to take on the identity, use the rhetoric, and you try to sound like Dr. King, and you're doing all this symbolism, but that's not your legacy, that's not your history, and then you kind of fooled us into thinking that like you come from that. Well, if we knew better, we'd be like, no, he didn't. And then we would have known that. We'd be like, okay, well, then he doesn't have it in him to necessarily fight for this. Like his background, he wasn't raised in any environment that would have helped him understand the consciousness or have felt the cost. Like a lot of us feel the cost, man. I was on Ancestry. I'm not going to take up too much more time on this subject, but we was talking earlier. I was on Ancestry.com recently today, and I just started digging and started looking at my family history, and they don't put a lot of the personal business. But you can just read and see what was going on in those times, and you can just see that it's some serious trauma that we dealt with. It's some serious trauma, some serious things was going on, and you could look, and going back and just seeing, like, reading how my grandfather's father, his grandfather was, they had him listed as a farm laborer. What kind of farm labor you think he was doing in Alabama or North Carolina? He was born in 1845. So I started thinking about like all the mess that my family had been through. I can't even imagine what they was dealing with on the plantations, going through hell. So you think about what we and tying this into what, you know, yeah, you say 21 trillion. Okay, fine. Give us our 12 to 17 trillion. And it took all y'all been breaking, you know, if I shoot you with a gun, you go in your arm or your leg, and it didn't take long to cause an injury. It's going to take a whole lot longer to fix it. So yeah, 12 to 17 trillion, pay us that cash, but y'all need to put the rest in to be about fixing. It needs to be about fixing. We need therapy. We need stuff dealing with trauma. It's going to be generations before we get this thing fixed.
Facts.
But I mean, back to you, brother. I don't want to go too deep.
No, definitely. I mean, you know, we're having a discussion, and this is an important discussion because it stems from the idea that reparations is not something that's doable, which has been echoed by the right and the left over the past, year and a half. We've heard the right and the left make the same claims. And some try to use the argument as political capital because they thought that it was something that would be popular among African Americans, as we're called in this nation. Some were genuine about it. But nevertheless, the conversation that we're having right now, it stems from the fact that this government just kicked out trillions of dollars with the Thanos snap. I mean, like, get it done, snap, and checks is going out. People getting direct deposits, right? So we know that it can be done. And I just want to say real quick, I want my brother, Where L to come back on, my brother, Dr. Logic. You know, we're doing this platform, Be the Power, BTP. If you like what you're hearing and you want to contribute to what we're doing as we try to expand this platform, you could cash at me at Lord Abba. You can use the super chat feature to send a donation. We want to expand the conversation so that we can start taking live calls. So I'm looking to do that within the next week so that, you know, people can call in and express some of what it is that they know or what it is that they're feeling. And we can answer some questions and get schooled on some things that we may not be aware of. So I just wanted to make that plug right there. We usually run the show Sundays, Thursdays, and Tuesdays. I mean, some days we don't do it. Some days when we have that, you know, like, yo, we doing it. We just do it. So it is what it is. So I just wanted to make that plug real quick. My brother, Where L, it look like you're frozen right now.
Am I?
Yeah, yeah. All right, I can hear you, but your screen is frozen.
Oh, I don't know. Is it still frozen?
I wanted to get to some of those comments too. I want to address some of these comments. So
just do that while Where L.
Yeah.
You want to do that real quick until Where L.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you though.
I'm gonna do this real quick.
Okay,
I don't know, because my screen is fine. I don't see anything. I don't know if my screen is frozen. But if you can hear me good, we don't necessarily need my screen. I'm not
okay.
All
right, there you go. There you go.
All right, we don't, because it ain't about me at all. I don't want nobody to think it's about me. You don't gotta look at me. I just want you to understand a couple things that we trying to drive home tonight. So understand this, right? One, first and foremost, the disillusions Black America had with the Barack Obama administration is, one, we thought we had our first Black president, and that was what put us to sleep in the first place, right? Politically. Because a lot of people, especially our younger constituents, don't really remember and wasn't really fully engaged politically in a cognitive way in the Bush administration. And they don't really remember how bad George Bush Jr. was for the economy. We're kind of almost at the same place we was at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. We're at that same point where we were economically, dealing with so many different things. We have COVID-19 that we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a war that did not have any justification. However, we're still in that war. But the parallels to kind of dissatisfaction and the polarity in this country is kind of similar to where we were when Barack Obama came into office. The economic conditions, the polarity in the country, so on and so forth. We're kind of in that same position. So we need to understand that and know what we need to do to respond in those type of conditions. So one thing I want to say, right? Black folks thought with Obama we had our first black president, but what we really got, what we thought we were getting and what we got were different. And what I mean by that is we thought we were getting we thought Obama was a black man who had a white mother, right? But what we really got was a white man who had a black father. Let that sink in. You understand? You're gonna have to let that marinate in. That's what we really got, because when we talk about American descendants of slavery, and we're not talking about a pigment. We're talking about a culture. We're talking about a heritage. We're talking about a history and a lineage that ties back into hundreds of years of disadvantage, hundreds of years of chattel slavery, hundreds of years of separation and the denial of accessing America for the very people who built this country with their flesh and bone. Obama is not tied into that in a way that strikes at his heart chords, that hits his soul like it hits us. When we're just speaking about that makes us feel a certain way because we're connected to that. But when we get back to the money part, right? Our correspondent Josh was already breaking down the data, talking about the trillions owed, how it's owed, why it's owed, so forth and so on. So I'm gonna go to another report, entitled "The Roadmap to not the Roadmap to Reparations, but what we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap," right? And Dr. Darity, in concert with Antonio Moore, and I believe a couple other economists, they put this report together. So in order to kind of like frame our position, because we need to understand our wealth position is directly connected to our political position in this country, right? And what Dr. Darity and Antonio Moore and others put together in this report, they outline something very specific. They say the 99th percentile black family is worth a mere 1,574,000, while the 99th percentile white family is worth over $12 million. This means over 870,000 white families have a net worth above $12 million, while out of the 20 million black families in America, fewer than 380,000 are even worth a single $1 million. By comparison, over 13 million of the total 85 million white families are millionaires or better. They're citing a study that was done by Moore and Brewing in 2017. I think that's very that's very important to understand that, right? We're talking about the growth, like Bernie Sanders, I believe, even though I didn't support his candidacy, right, for personal reasons, but I think he said it best when he said that we're experiencing the greatest wealth inequality in the history of humankind and human history, right? And if we frame this and understand what this kind of report and other reports are saying, we know that the American descendants of slavery, if we're experiencing the greatest gap in wealth inequality, we know that we're at the bottom of that. So we're the people who are experiencing, we are the group that is experiencing the greatest wealth inequality in the history of humankind. And if that's not an emergency, I don't know what is. You understand? So when we have that type of an emergency that is creating the conditions that control and impact every one of our lives, especially in America, like how do we respond to that? We talk about COVID-19 and Black folks being in various cities, like not even targeted by this virus, but being like the imprint of what this virus is. And now we're like the face of what this virus is. In Detroit, 70%, Chicago, 70%, New Orleans, 70%. And in many other places, like this narrative has changed to us believing that we can't get this thing, to us being like the poster face for the COVID-19 experience. And we're dying in crazy numbers. We can get into what that's about, but the fact of the matter is we're still dying, right? And what is this all about, and how do we create a solution for that? And if we don't understand what we need to do politically and how all this is tied together, we're going to continue to eat the same consequences that we're eating today. So I'm gonna pass it back to Abba with that. And we just gotta get clear on how politics connect us to our very existence in this country and in this life. You can't get around our political duties as tax-paying citizens in this country and as descendants of people who built the greatest country in the world. If we want to just dwindle out and evaporate into nothingness, that's what happened. But we have to wake up and understand our responsibilities and duties as citizens and our familial debt to our ancestors who made it possible for us to do what we're doing today.
Definitely. Brother Josh, we have a bunch of questions in the chat. I would love for you to address some of them. Let me know the ones that you wanted to address so we can highlight them. I see a bunch of stuff right now in the chat, a lot of things that people are saying. And, before we close out, we definitely want to address some of these questions. So if you could set it off, and then Brother Ware L, you can come in right behind him, and I'll give my measure as well.
Well, I never really am one to disparage a particular political party, especially dealing with us, because, I feel like we've given Democrats our vote without an exchange for a very long time, and a lot of us want to be considered what we call American, living an American life. So as we get to maybe like the higher ups of being able to make money or something like that, we want to have some type of, we get more conservative because we're like, well, we need to be able to preserve this. We need to be able to keep this. Don't change it up now when we get to the top. That's how a lot of us think. So I don't necessarily like to our people like that when they become Republicans. But I did want to address. Let's have a conversation. Old head Deuce said Republicans are better for the reparations argument when presented correctly. And I see another time he put down here. Let's see.
Was it the last one that said, I see a Republican
black man, the best way to reparations? Democrats have proven to undermine us every time. Did you want to address? Do you want me to go?
Go ahead, brother.
Okay, so what I would say to that is, how I look at it is this. If you say a Republican president, maybe, but then you got to also think about the Republican. Reparations is an act of Congress, so it's not just going to be the president necessarily taking action. So it'll probably be Congress because they have to vote on it and appropriate. Congress is in charge of the purse. So when you're talking about paying out $17 trillion, yeah, that's going to take an act of Congress. And we all know that most of these Republican states the Republicans today are like just right-wing racists for the most. Too much racism running rampant in Republican congressmen. Look at those states. We're talking about states like Mississippi, where we're 40% of the Mississippi population, and we can't get anybody in power now. We're talking about Georgia, where they're purging us out of voting rolls. We're talking about North Carolina, where they've done so much to stop us from even be able to vote. With all of these states are Republican states, so I don't know how, even if we get a black Republican president, that he would have enough power to sway those Republican states. So that's why I say the Democratic Party is the best bet, generally because it's the most liberal, because it would take a huge uprooting that would have to take us to get our people to vote, instead of voting Democrat, to vote Republican. And we can just kind of mobilize and move people to put pressure on the Democratic Party, let the Democratic Party put their feet to the fire. We're 25% of the Democratic Party's voting electorate. So that means they can't win without us. You saw what happened with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was leading the polls. He was a lot of people. I mean, you could see mainstream media had pretty much given up. They're like, well, I guess it's going to be Sanders. I mean, he was on the pathway. And then what happened? We realized the crack that he had in his campaign. The crack was he put all his effort and energy into putting grassroots activists, Latino grassroots activists on his campaign. He spent most of his time campaigning in some of these other regions that he pretty much ignored the black vote. He ignored talking about issues that specifically affected us. Matter of fact, he was hostile toward it. And you saw what happened. Joe Biden, I mean, he just rode the coattail of Obama. He rode the idea, the association of Obama. And then he actually won South Carolina. And then after America and the Democratic Party figured out that Bernie Sanders could not win the black vote, everybody pretty much, it was a domino effect, and he lost. So, and you followed up. I just wanted to see what you said following up here. You said black conservatives are annoying, but in the future that will change. You know, I don't know. I mean, maybe something will happen because maybe Bernie's strategy actually works out in the future. It's not working out right now, but I don't see how we become Republicans or conservatives, because we need to not make binary decisions. You know, just because we're frustrated with Democrats, and just because we're not getting, you know, we don't want to vote for Joe Biden, or that doesn't mean we vote for Trump. Just because we're frustrated with Democrats doesn't mean we become a Republican, because we have to understand what comes along with that. So in the you can jump from out of the frying pan into the fire, as the phrase goes. So I think it's much more of an uphill battle, man. I mean, if just to look at some of the states that we're dying in crazily, you look at like Louisiana. Look at the history of that. I don't know, man. Did you want to say something to that, bro? You're muted. You're muted.
Your mic's still muted, Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something real quick. I just want to read something real quick, because I started this discussion with a quote from Noble Drew Ali. That, like I said, that is what formed my political base to get me more into politics. So just bear with me real quick. This is a piece from what Noble Drew Ali taught, and it's called Political Slavery. And it says, anytime a man or a woman fails or refuses to cast a sacred ballot at the polls, they separate themselves from all rights of an American citizen. For surely this is the one connecting medium for a citizen to his nation. They become no more than belated beasts of burden. There are reasons why certain classes who are more or less independent take no part in politics, since they say they get nothing out of it, such in the way of material gain. This is no less than a political slave, since they refuse to voice their sentiments at the polls. Another form of political slavery, which is probably more prevalent among the less independent classes, is that of being forced into one of the major parties and there bribed, coerced, or otherwise forced to vote the wishes of someone else, regardless of their own minds. Before there can be general relief for the economic good of all forms of political slavery must be abolished and every citizen must take his part in the affairs of the nation. And I wanted to read that because I think that we need to be looking more so towards who is going to cater to our political needs more than representing, just the political party. Because if we try to keep it on a party line and saying we need this, because at that time, from the article that I was reading from, our people were Republicans, right? We didn't switch to Democrats until the 1960s. So, I think we shouldn't look at it along the lines of conservative and liberal, although reparations would be more of a progressive liberal idea. I think we should just look at politics along the lines of what are you going to do for us, period. So, brother, Where L, did you have anything you wanted to add to that or any of the questions in general?
I mean, absolutely. I wanted to speak on two different things. First, I want to bring up, if you could pull up Ronald Dunham's comment. It was like, how do we punish them? If you can find that, pull that up for the people, right?
I can find it.
And the way that I'll respond to that is the same way Huey P. Newton said that Black folks need to be in a position where we can offer America a political consequence, right? And I think that what he meant by that, what I suggest today and what he meant in his time in the 70s is two different things, right? But a political consequence comes about by people that are first and foremost politically active, right? You can't bring about a political consequence if you're not active politically or engaging in political action. You have to think about everything that we do in this society as a political action, right? Because it is. So, like Tony and Yvette have suggested, a down ballot, voting down ballot, right? As a response to the deaf tone or the tone deafness of the Democrat Party, right? That's a form of a political response. That's how you make them pay and make them understand. Ever since Carter to present, Democrats haven't been able to beat the Republicans without Black folks turning out in over 90%, right? So unless we come out 90% or better, they can't win an election. But they haven't been responding to us as significantly as we represent in that political party. So that we need to be having the ears of all the Democrats, because they need to understand that we know they can't win without us, not on the presidential level, right? So we need to use that as our leverage, our importance, our X factorness in federal presidential elections as leverage and say, listen, we understand as a group, and this is how we have to all be on code together with this. We understand as a group that Democrats cannot win without the Black vote coming out in a unified, uniform way, right? And we need to use that to produce a Black agenda. And if they're not going to give us a Black agenda, we're not going to vote for them. That's a political consequence. And it comes with consequences on both sides. But we must understand the stakes, and we must understand what's at stake, right? So moving forward, right, we got to understand, like, when we talk about the polarity of this country and thinking, the polarity in our thinking, first and foremost, that it has to be a situation of Republican or Democrat. I think that's a very centralized way of thought, a very federal way of thought. And then we get there because we have skipped over local and state politics in a major way, right? In our last show, we talked about third-party politics and how third-party politics plays out in a realistic way on a local and state level, right? It doesn't really make sense, or you can't really visualize it in a federal way right now because of everything that's involved with federal politics, far as private interests, corporate interests, special interests. It's a lot. It's billions and billions of dollars that's invested on that level. But we don't have the wealth position to do that at this moment, right? Without reparations, we can't play that game that way. But on a local level, with your city council, your mayor, your county board, your education board, that's a different game. We can build a winning coalition based around a Black agenda on a local level, and it can be very real that way. We have to dig in deep, put our feet to the ground, and move locally politically. That's where everything starts for us, right? And I don't think it needs to be a should we be Republican or Democrat concept. We need to say, what does our group need? And we need to coalesce around the needs of our people and push for policies that address our needs. And that needs to be our only motivation. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican or any of that. If it doesn't enhance or promote policies that's going to benefit our people on the smallest level, which is local, I don't care nothing about that, because it's local policies that's destroying us immediately. It's state policies that's destroying us secondarily. We don't get to federal policies till much later, but it's your state. People are suffering, and we have been suffering from state and local government for a long time. The whole Civil War was about states' rights, violating federal rights. We didn't get the benefits intended from the Civil Rights Act because states didn't care nothing about that. Obamacare, which was a push for universal health care, failed because states didn't care about that, right? Until we can get political energy in the states that we live in, that which could only come by exercising political energy in the cities and towns that we live in, we will not have a shot federally, y'all. That's my message to y'all. We have to energize our cities politically through education and action. And once we're able to ignite our cities and spread that fire through our cities to our states and understand the proximity to power that we need in order to be effective, we don't have a shot in this game called government. But that's my response. Yeah, you know what I mean? I think you're still muted, Abba. You gotta unmute your.
Definitely. And we still trying to figure this thing out, family. Still trying to figure this thing out. So pardon me. Josh, you can definitely close out with that. I hope that I can't wait until we're able to take live calls, because we definitely want to start bringing people on, and so we can start hearing, a lot of their thoughts and their reason. I want to give a shout out to Old Head Deuce. We got our first chat. That we lit. We lit.
we appreciate it. I wanted to say too for the brother Naeem. I've been following him for a while. He's been cool for a while, and he's one of the few out here that are down for putting out like real information. Not only real information that's like responsible and verified and well researched, but also you can tell the intent is not to just he's still around. Let's put it this way: there's a whole lot of people that's not still around, and because their intent was to take advantage of some type of conscious hustle for a period of time and then and keep it moving. But this dude is been doing this for the people for a long time. I just wanted to give that shout out. So if anybody that's hesitant to put something towards the cause, a couple of dollars towards the cause, you don't have to have that hesitancy because you're debating about whether this dude is going to do the right thing. So
brother, honest. Thank you, brother.
No doubt. I wanted to kind of close out, y'all, with this clip from it's a brother named Eddie Glaw. Man, he's I won't say I've always agreed with everything he said, but he's been on point a lot. And he said something that I'm gonna let him say it, but what he said was very eye-opening, and it just made me realize that this is not going to be like 2008. This is what we're going to experience after this, man. Is we got to really think about it. That's why it's time. There's no time for any playing. I mean, we got to get serious now.
We got to get serious. Let me just say real quick, bro. Before I was watching something yesterday that said somebody said when America catches a cold, Black America gets the coronavirus.
Yeah, I remember a couple shows ago.
I seen one projection yesterday that said it's possible that if this thing is not done right for us, and we're seeing the reports come out that, you know, quote unquote, Black businesses are already having problems with the stimulus package, that this could take us back to 1950s and 60s level poverty. We can't let that happen. This is what this platform is designed for. We must become the power. And I'm going to close out with a little bit more of that later. But go ahead, brother John.
Yeah, I'm gonna Huey P.
Wait, hold on. So, somebody said, "Yo, brother Josh, remind me of Huey from the Boondocks." Laugh out loud. Sharp and sincere brother, for real, for real. Definitely.
Yeah.
We got our own personal Huey up here, y'all.
I think I'm a little bit taller, so
Yeah. He taller. He definitely taller.
yeah.
Go ahead, brother.
But I wanted to play this clip real quick.
All right.
It's funny you said Huey because I was thinking about bringing up something dealing with Huey. Matter of fact, I'm gonna just say it real quick. You know, I would just invite. I'm a reference this book until y'all get it. What it was called Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap by Mirza Baradaran. Right? You want to go and get this book. Just go get the book. This book, she talks about a lot of things. Like I remember we were talking, we'll get into it on another show, but she was talking about how a lot of so-called how Black power as a phrase and a concept was co-opted by Republicans, by Richard Nixon's campaign. And even some of the strongest voices that we had were supporting it. If you talk about the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, in the April 1970 Muhammad Speaks. Now I'm gonna this copy for myself, but she mentioned in the book that they had something in there that supported Richard Nixon. Supporting Richard Nixon and his idea of Black capitalism, which was we found out that a lot of people already knew that was a lie. Also, UEP and Bobby Seals, and how they kind of they kind of got off of socialism, and they kind of got off of a lot of the demands from the government, and they're saying, "Hey, we need to support Black business. We need to get into Black capitalism." So I don't want to get into that. We'll get into that in another show, but I just want to close out with this here clip. With Eddie Claude. Let me share my screen real quick. So over here. Wait a minute.
While you're doing that, I want to give a shout out to the brother Old Head Deuce again. He gave us another donation in the super chat. Honors, brother. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I got it.
It's low, Josh.
Y'all share your audio, bro.
Oh.
You might have to go back out and then do share audio.
Okay.
I want to just thank everybody else, everybody that's listening in, tuning in to the Be the Power Hour. You know, this is our job to try to give a political education in the best way that we know how. You know, like I said, my brother, Dr. Logic Supreme, my brother Ware L, he's our political analyst. Our brother Josh is just the analyst. He does our number crunching, and he's also sharp with this information that's needed. Me, I'm just a facilitator, just trying to get this thing done and keep it moving. But I do have aspirations to run for office. And I think if you are a leader in your community to any degree, that you should also start to develop those aspirations, because in my opinion, that's true leadership. I follow, again, the real Moorish movement, and Prophet Noble Drew Ali, he was about politics. They voted to get brothers into office back in the 1920s in Chicago, and in Illinois. So I don't care what type of organization you're a part of, politics is how we are going to make the impact that needs to be made. Martin Luther King Jr., although he didn't run, he gives us a blueprint on what true activism does in the face of so much, just so much that we face over time. So I'm gonna add Brother Josh's screen in, play that. Then we're gonna go to our brother Where L, and then I'm gonna close it out.
Are just trying to hang in there for each other, and hopefully we'll come out the other side.
Eddie, tell me what this is doing to the African-American community, small business owners from a health perspective, people who don't have the liberty to socially distance.
Well, the first thing that we need to recognize is that we're dying. We're dying at alarming rates. We're looking at the data as it's coming in because we had to cry for it. We're seeing 70% of the deaths in Milwaukee, African-American, 70% of the deaths in Chicago, African-American, 70% of the deaths in New Orleans, African-American. When we look in my own home state, 72% of the death, African-American. In Jackson County, my own hometown, 6 people have died. 5 of those 6 people have been from my town, Moss Point, Mississippi. So we're dying. And we're seeing the disproportionate impact of the burden of this pandemic precisely because of the inequality and the deep structural racism that has defined American society for generations. And Stephanie, we have to put this into context. I've said this earlier, and I close my eyes because I'm trying to think of the devastation. We barely survived the Great Recession of 2008. We lost our homes, we lost our jobs. We re-entered the labor market through the gig economy and at the bottom rung. We've barely gotten back on our feet. And now here comes this pandemic. And so we lost a decade, the decade of the 90s, because of the Great Recession of 2008. I'm talking about Black America. And I think the effects of this pandemic will throw us back into the 60s and the 50s in terms of our economic standing. But I'm worried about our psychic and existential state. Yeah, our psychic and existential state. I am. It is, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at the numbers and you look at like when he said about we barely survived the 2008 crash, a lot of us had a disproportionate amount of wealth in the home ownership and retirement. And when I say home ownership, when I say, we had a disproportionate amount of wealth in real estate and in the stock market, but that wasn't like in spare wealth, like that you're investing to try to get rich or something like that, or the type of build some type of wealth portfolio. Most of that was home ownership and your retirement, and that was wiped out. So if you were able to get back to where you were, now it's just about to get wiped out again. So that's why I said we cannot keep. We have to be serious now. We can't afford to, try to just go along and get along. We cannot afford to abdicate responsibility. And like now, it has to be a demand. You cannot if you're not talking about reparations in your discussion, look in the mirror and try to understand. Like you need to be going back and look at your family lineage. You need to be understanding that all they paid to get you to where you are today, and now you're in the same position that they were in. How does that equate to the status quo? How does that? So you built America, but you're not ever allowed to be an American. So we progressed as far as we've ever progressed, and now we weren't doing anything. I don't think that we can move forward without getting serious now. And I'm talking about everybody. You can't. It doesn't need to be no more of this outside weird stuff and being a part of all these other groups. Everybody needs to be on one accord. What group you're part of? Nation of Islam, kind of Moorish group. You in the church. I don't do politics. It's not about that. It's about we don't have wealth. We're at the bottom. It's right. Existential state. everybody needs to have the same message. Look, we may not agree on everything. We may not agree on what we're gonna call God or how you view abortion or how you view, but we agree that the middle black family is worth 1,700. It's probably gonna be worse than less than that. We agree that it's not even a matter of agreeing. It's a matter of fact that, and probably this has probably been accelerated, but the median black wealth was on the track to be 0 by 20. That's going to be probably accelerated. And we already know that the bottom 50% of black folks is worth 120. That's probably less. It's probably less than that now. So, hey, it's time to be on code. It's time to be talking about one thing. If reparations is not on your agenda when you're talking about politics, and if the people that you're supporting is not talking about stuff that's going to be directly and specifically addressing stuff in our community, then we can't support them. And we just gonna have to just roll with it. But I want to close with that.
You on mute, Ab.
There I go again. That Glory piece was, that piece was powerful. It was sobering when I listened to it the other day, man. It was really, really, really sobering. So I want to bring my brother Where L on. His screen look a little choppy from my end. I don't know if y'all can see it from y'all's end. My phone is messed up, so I can't see nothing through my phone right now. And we can hear you, brother. So just go in.
Okay. What I just wanted to say is two things, really, right? Three things, really. I wanted to just bring in perspective something that Josh was talking about when he was just closing out, right? And then I want to talk about a comment that I see, and then close out with a little perspective. So when Josh is framing like all of the lostness that we're taking economically, that clip, so profoundly touched on, it's like we really need to understand that situation. And when he's talking about losing all of that wealth that we built from the 90s, right? That we exercised, and we saw that building up into 2008, where the housing market collapsed, and we saw that big financial fallout in 2008. We lost that wealth from the 90s, right? And what that brother was saying is that if we don't understand what we need to do and get the required government response, we're going to go back to the Jim Crow era. And a lot of y'all don't understand what that was, because y'all think it was just about the civil rights movement was just about, being able to use the same restroom and eat at the same diners as white folks. So y'all don't understand what Martin Luther King and all those courageous people were fighting for. But we're going to do subsequent shows and really dig deep and unpack what that fight was really about. But I want to talk about a comment as I close from Wazer Netter Yahuru 7. He says, what about the other two forms of government that actually pass laws? Why isn't it publicized like the presidential election? Their election is every 2 years, and they actually pass laws. I can only assume that he's talking about the congressional or the legislative branch of government.
Local elections, basically.
And I think he's talking about judicial as well, right? But there's only one branch of government that actually passes laws, right? That not even passes, but actually like puts together, writes the laws, votes on the laws, and puts that bill on the president's desk. That's the legislative branch of government, right? Those are your lawmakers. The judicial branch, they interpret laws that have been made or bills that have been passed already. The governor, which is the executive head of the state, or the president, they sign these bills into law. They make these actions law, these acts of Congress or these acts of the General Assembly on a state level. They sign these actions into law and make that law or make that action a lawful reality, right? So I agree with him, right? But what I have to say about that is there's no hope in voting for a stranger. And then unless we're building these legislators in our backyard, I don't see how we get out of our present condition. There are great minds and great people that live in our community. We need to start building legislators, lawmakers, by first building good city councilmen because they create the most basic form of law, which is your city ordinances and codes, right? They are the ones writing those laws. Those are those city councilmen, aldermen, however they may structure it in your community and where you live. Those are your local lawmakers. And then we need to move them along to the General Assembly, to your state Senate or your state House of Representatives, right? Your state rep, and make laws and write laws on a state level. Then we will have some trust that has been built, some familiarity. We know these people, and then we can support them on a federal thing and move them to the Congress or the Congressional House of Representatives or the Congressional Senate, right? Then we can do that. I think trying to figure out who to vote for on a congressional level in the White House just doesn't make any sense when you don't know these people. I don't like voting for strangers. That's why I am a hardcore local politics promoter, because you cannot trust people that you don't know. You can barely trust the people that you do know. So and I only can support people that I know. And that's just a mentality and a mindset that we need to cultivate. That's not an absolute thing, because of course we're not going to know everybody from every state, but we need to develop that mindset to start building legislators, lawmakers in our backyard. And that's how we deal with that question from the brother Yahoo 7. Build these people back in our backyard, brother. I agree with you. Our lawmakers are the most, I ain't gonna say the most important thing, because I believe every branch of government is equally important. And I believe it was set up that way. We need to understand that our issues are multifaceted, from criminal justice reform to all the laws that are written and to how they're executed on a executive level. So we need a lot of political education, bro. And I agree with you. That part gets left out. But if y'all keep tuning into this show, we're going to educate you and feed you on how we need to get after all of that stuff in a substantive way and bring all the branches of government together and our role we play and what we can do to ignite that political energy in our own communities, man. And I'm going to close out with that, brother.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Hey, we're at the end of another powerful discussion. And I hope that people got a understanding of this topic. For those of you who came in late, go back and watch the beginning of this presentation. The article that I was reading based on a New York Times story about how they came up with this $2 trillion. I mean, they just out of thin air. And it's being pushed as a debt. But the article shows that it's not necessarily that, because the government has the ability to offset the debt by simply buying up the treasury bonds, etc. So, and I'm gonna put that in the link. I'm gonna put that link in the chat as well. I'm gonna do it here. This is the YouTube comment section. The people that's watching on Facebook will not be able to see this, but I will put it in there as well. And I'm hoping that many of you, first and foremost, click like. If you're watching on YouTube, please click like on the video so we can start getting into the algorithm. We had a good little audience. Our numbers are growing. But for those of you who are listening and paying attention to this show, we need you to understand that this platform is designed to help activate something within you. We represent various schools of thought. Me and my brothers We basically come from the Moorish school of thought, but we've been through the Nuwapian school of thought, the 5% school of thought, study some of the teachings of the Nation of Islam. We are the Malcolm X of the new civil rights era, because that's what we're in right now. We're in the new civil rights era. When I see other political advocates and activists who speak on our behalf, like Yvette Carnell, like Antonio Moore, they represent the Dr. King of this modern day civil rights movement. And back in those days, King and Malcolm, they basically had a beef, and it was really Malcolm because he was listening to Elijah's anti-political rhetoric. And Malcolm started to realize that that rhetoric was weak and it was fluffy the more he moved away from Elijah Muhammad. And he sought to build with Dr. King. And there's an article out as well that shows that Dr. King was, according to Coretta Scott King, very fond of Malcolm X. When Malcolm was killed, King wired her a telegraph stating, giving his condolences, etc. And if I can find that article, I'll post it up on Facebook again as well. So our job is to try to reach out to some of those people that claim to be consciousness, right? And activate within them a certain form of reasoning that says we've been preaching and teaching the same stuff for decades. We've been following the leaders of so many different groups, and today you have a whole bunch of what I call Oswald Bates guys that get up there and talk a whole bunch of incoherent nonsense that's not moving the needle in any way. It is just mouth diarrhea for people that have toilets for ears, that want to hear that crap all the time. Our job is to try to let you know that although we are in these different schools of thought, we have to move together politically. And we're not just going to be having discussions. We're going to open this thing up to debate for those people that say that we shouldn't be involved in this white man's government or in this white man's system. I'm going to deconstruct, and my brothers are going to deconstruct these weak, fallacious arguments and expose them for what they are. Fear. You fear this European, this white man, as you call him. And this is why, as I said earlier, you do not want to engage politically. You fear him. And we have to be honest about it. You don't think that you can elevate yourself to the same mental capacity that this man has elevated, or led us to believe that he has elevated to. But when we look at politics today, when we look at today's Democratic Party, we can see that these people are not that bright at all. My bros on this panel will run circles around most of those politicians just on an intellectual level. So I say that to say, policy-wise, we have to step it up and understand that the same methodology we use in deconstructing or putting together the scholarship of ancient history, we need to start shifting towards understanding politics, because that's where policy is made. That's why I was reading the CARES Act today, because I wanted to understand what was in it. And that was something that was suggested by my brother, Dr. Logic. Don't just speak on it, make sure you read it, right? And I said, yeah, that's true, because why should we rely on what the media reports about it? That's part of the reason why we have this platform, so that we can start building, so that we can start creating the political leaders in your neighborhoods. So make sure that y'all start sharing these videos and sharing the conversations of the ADOS movement in general. Because again, I want to stress, we are the Malcolm X side of this political movement. Make no mistake about it. And some people, they might not be feeling us. We might rub them wrong. We might not be what they idealize as political spokespersons, right? But the people in the streets that we speak to directly, from my hood in Queens, Far Rockaway, shout out to my hood always, to Brooklyn, to Compton, to Detroit, to Texas, the people in the hoods that will listen to somebody like me, oh, they're going to listen to somebody like me. So whether someone is feeling us or not is inconsequential to the point that we're stressing that we have to stop just focusing on fighting the power. And we have to start shifting our focus to becoming the power. And by becoming the power, then we will have the power to make a change. And with that, I'll say peace.
Peace.
Peace, peace.
That like the whole concept of a prison would be different.